belonging naturally or essential, okay? So remember that. Intrinsic is something that is natural. And if you apply that to principles around information security, intrinsic are things that are typically normal within our organizations, day-to-day patterns and behavior. And as attackers, this is what we are trying to emulate. We are trying to go with the flow. We're trying to use standard protocols. We're trying to use things that look legitimate, things that look typical within environments. So we're trying to be intrinsic in nature for what we typically do. Extrinsic is exactly the opposite. Externally, not natural, something that comes from the outside in, okay? And so, our jobs in security is to detect abnormal behavior coming from the outside that may look in every way, shape, or form as something that might be on the inside. And that's why you see a lot of these, social engineering attacks and things like that happening, is due to emulating what users do on a regular basis. And I'll show you some of those attacks. And I'm actually working on a new version I'll demonstrate here of the new social engineer toolkit, which has a brand new, awesome way of exploitation, which should be cool. But for me, when I started looking at offense, right, and that's where my career started with, is focusing on offensive techniques and exploitation, that type of stuff. And what's nice about that is it's very easy for us on the offense to say everything is wrong and kind of break into everything and smash everything. The hard part is really the defensive piece of understanding what it takes to look for traffic that looks in every way, shape, or form as legitimate. But how do you actually go and look at that environment? And so that's what I'll be talking a little about today. For me, when I look at this industry, I see it as one of the most pressing issues is understanding what the attackers are doing. And me just being a pen tester doesn't mean that I'm emulating what the offense is doing in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of different patterns and techniques that everybody uses that are very different in every way, shape, or form. You heard a lot of great talks today that use techniques that I don't use. It's what they found their niche in and kind of moving towards those different areas. And so since you have a lack of understanding, the focus in this industry has moved more towards, instead of fixing a lot of the basics that we see out there, and you've probably heard a lot of my talks talk about focusing more on the basics, and now it's on, finding a single exploit or finding a patch for a single exploit or a specific vulnerability or fixing ransomware. I had a bank call me on the phone, out of the blue, and normally when I get my phone numbers and it comes from a thing, I don't answer it, but I was like, all right, I'll answer this one. And I answered and like, hey, we're a bank, so-and-so, a very large bank, and not a customer of ours. And like, hey, TrustedSec has a great reputation in the industry. We want to engage your services. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that we have a great reputation, all that stuff. What can we do for you? They're like, well, we want to build you an incident response program. I'm like, okay, that's cool. We do IR and all this other stuff. Like, yeah, we already have kind of an IR process. What we want to do is we want to use you kind of as a broker so that when we get hit with ransomware, you guys can pay the Bitcoin. And I'm like, what the And I actually I started saying that on the phone and I kind of backed off a little bit. I thought I was being like pranked by somebody. I was like waiting for Ashton Kutcher to come out and like, you got punked. But what's interesting is instead of fixing, the root cause of like business continuity and disaster recovery and doing things on your endpoints that try to stop ransomware, instead it's like, hey, I'm just going to pay the ransom because that's what's, hot right now in this industry and that's what we need to focus on. And you have malware and APTs and stuff like that when you have passwords of password 1 in your environment still. What's interesting as being on the offense, I never understood, and this is something that took me a long time to kind of wrap my mind around. Being early in my consulting career, and I would just go into a company and I'd smash up everything and I'd hit the ground and I'd own everything and steal all the data and everything. I couldn't understand why they had all these stupid vulnerabilities out there. But you have a million stupid vulnerabilities. How do you prioritize your time and actually go and invest and fix them? So I'll talk a little bit about that. But for me, it's focusing on the basic stuff. Now, the argument has always been in this industry that a blue has to be right 100% of the time, right? And the red team only needs to be right once, or the offense or the hackers only need to be right once. So we no longer have the luxury of being 100% right. It's just not possible being 100% secure. The blue and the red team need to understand. But this is one thing that I really respected that I saw. This is Egypt. He's one of the Metasploit dev guys, a really good guy. And this is Jeremiah Grossman, who ran White Hat Security, another really good guy, big web app guy. And Jeremiah said, it said that an adversary just needs to find one vulnerability to win. To do that, they just need to find one system the target didn't know they owned. And that's completely true, right? If you have a system that you didn't know had a specific exposure or marketing put up another site, it's very easy for me as an attacker to exploit that, gain access, and you may not have the same type of monitoring capabilities in those systems. But what Egypt said as a rebuttal, and I fully agree with this, and this is what puts us now on the equal playing field, in my opinion. Counterpoint, once you're on a system, adversary roles reverse. Blue only needs to find one indicator of compromise to catch the red. And I completely agree with that. As attackers, it's very easy for us to get it. If you look at the studies and the statistics, it usually takes us an hour to break into a computer system, right? Especially if we do reconnaissance ahead of time, we send a fish out, compromise the machine, kidding around, like all the products and stuff like that's at this point pretty trivial. And so now you have access to this machine. While we're actually trying to get access to other systems, lateral movements or moving to other systems to get access to the data that we need, that's very difficult for us to stay underneath the radar and not trigger alarms that may catch us and to let them know that there's a breach there. So it's no longer, red could always go in and smash everything up and break everything. It's, the blue also has to be accountable for detecting what's actually happening out there. And believe me, the red team, we've always had it easy, right? I can't remember, it's been years and years and years, but I would walk into a place and I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to own everything and I break everything and I steal all this data and I walk out like I'm the biggest badass in the world, right? And I hand this report, I'm like, hey, here's all your findings, good luck, and I walk away. And I'd always get the comment like, oh, hey, your consultants are coming in, hey, you're great at blowing everything up and walking out afterwards. I'm like, yep, I enjoy that. I don't envy the blue team at all, right? And the red team industry and the pen testing industry, it really became all about, hey, look at me, I'm the most important person in the world. And you see a lot of the stunt hacking that occurred and all this other stuff about how awesome we are in the security industry and everything that we're doing. Now, some of it, is trying to change the industry for the better. A lot of folks that were on the stage today are trying to change the industry for the better. But a lot of it has to come down to, they're not making the industry better if you're going into companies, blowing them up and walking around. For me, it's easier to complain that the industry is broke than to actually go and fix it. I think it takes time and effort and working with people to actually go and fix it. I don't envy the magnitude at hand for what the blue team is doing. There's so much stuff out there to go and secure that, in order for us to really get to a position to defend against it, it's going to take a lot of time. And I'll show some of that. So how are we getting owned? Now, first and foremost, being able to social engineer is the number one. Now what's interesting is I was just on a engagement recently, and they got hit by ransomware. Can anybody guess why the person was hit with ransomware in the first place? Right there. What? Oh, yeah, sorry. Working out, right? Pornography still tends to be one of the largest issues when it comes to ransomware. No relation to what's shown up here. None at all. But what was interesting with this one, is that, the people that were in charge of this organization had no idea that the individual was browsing pornography on a laptop computer and got infected by ransomware, and the ransomware completely blew out all of their file shares. And what's even better is that person had local admin rights, right? And then it spread across the network and encrypted all their file shares and everything else. So it was fantastic, right? Great time that they had to deal with, and all because of Charles Barkley. Terrible shake weights. We should have a conference. The conference should be, you have to give a presentation while doing the shake weight the entire time. Every presentation. That'd be amazing. Called Shake Weight Con, huh?
Sponsoring it.
Yeah, I'm sponsoring it. TrustedSec's going to sponsor that one. So if you look at some of the statistics, right? And this is just based off of our analysis between BDS and TrustedSec. 82% of the compromises that we saw were due to end user compromises. And that's no crazy statistic to us. Most of that seems to be pretty accurate for what we see consistently across the industry. And usually it has to do with, people clicking on stuff or opening up attachments. But if you look at a securities organization, there's supposed to be multiple layers of protection, right? You're supposed to have, things coming into the network and expecting all that. And then from there, once it gets to endpoint, protection on that. You're seeing all of those different layers failing us. Because for us as attackers, it's very easy to get around those. It's funny, most malware looks for things like sandbox technology, right? Most malware looks for things like, or gets around things like antivirus, right? Most, viruses use RFC, compliant, protocols like HTTPS or DNS exfiltration or ways of getting out that don't trigger normal methods. I'm not using a reverse TCP and Metasploit. That's not typically how it's working. So they use patterns that they know that we have, for protection. And so even the stuff that we used to use for protection, just to get rid of the mass commodity of type of things, isn't really even working anymore. Perimeter compromises are still out there, but not as much. I mean, there's still definitely a whole lot of vulnerabilities out there, definitely a whole lot of exposures. Doesn't mean we're getting any better on the outside. It just means that it's so much easier to go after users. It's a high return, low investment on that side of time and effort and skill than it is anything else. I mean, I can go and buy an EK or exploit kit on the market for $200 to $800, and now I can send, social engineering campaigns out the next day. I don't have to worry about, figuring out what SQL injection is or learning how to hack web applications. I can just target the users and then use my ransomware stuff or whatever I'm going to use in order to do it. 4% employee error, typically around sharing credentials across the board or using the same, by the way, as a pen tester, I highly recommend when you're on a pen test, we wrote a script. We've cracked, we're at 96% of the LinkedIn passwords right now. Mine was cracked, by the way. Those guys, of course, pointed that out in the chat room the other day. It's an old password, I'm not using it anymore. Dicks. And then, of course, I have people on Twitter like, hey, your password is cracked on LinkedIn. I'm like, I know, all right, my guys already got me before. Anyway, but we got about 95, 96% of the LinkedIn passwords cracked. But what's interesting is we were on a pen test, and we wrote a quick tool just to grep through. And so you just grep for the customer name, email address, and then the names that match based off of public email addresses. So like, for example, let's say my name was Dave Kennedy. Do a search for any Dave Kennedys or like iterations of Dave Kennedy, like D Kennedy, Dave.Kennedy, etc. And then match those to any like Gmail addresses or anything else. Also matching them to the company name, and then extracting those passwords, and then trying to use the same password for that username. It's worked like successfully. We had like 4 successful in one company that we're doing a pen test with that still have the same password that they're using with it. And what's great is you can actually see patterns as well. Like someone might have like a password of like October 19th, 2019. So you do like October 19th, 2020, whatever you want to do, like iterate up. And those work as well. So it's fantastic to figure out people's passwords with that. So let's take a look at how endpoint compromises work. And I think it's important to understand because if you look at probability and risk, right? In security, sorry, one more time. In fact, I'm not going to even talk about the rest of my slides. I'm just going to keep this up here and just keep talking. In security, risk management is a big thing for us, right? What I learned going from smashing and grabbing everything and walking out saying, why can't a company fix all these vulnerabilities, is that in organizations, they don't have one dedicated security person to one employee. So you don't have a person behind someone's desk like, nope, don't click that. That's not good. Nope, shut that down. No, if you click that, I'm going to, okay. That's not business savvy, right? So we have all these risks that we have to deal with and all these different programs that make our security program. Vulnerability management and patch management and hardening and all this other stuff that make up what we consider information security today. But we have all these risks and we don't really know how to prioritize a lot of that because we have all this risk. And so that's what we try to do is balance, hey, hopefully it's a little bit hard for people to get in and maybe they're so loud that we can detect them, once they kind of weed down into these areas that we can respond and minimize the damage to our company. So if you look at 2 of your highest levels of risk at all, it's going to be your perimeter and end users, right? And what's great is I go into companies time and time again, and I break in and I smash everything. I'm like, did you guys see us? Like, no. I'm like, okay, well, you have this SIM here. You've had it for like 8 years. Why isn't your SIM detecting us? You're like, oh, well, our SIM's really good on our servers. We don't get endpoint logs because there's too much traffic. I'm like, why don't you have endpoint logs? That's your highest probability of compromise, and you're not pulling event logs? Just event logs. Like, you know what you can do with event logs? Just a couple of them. Like you can detect past the hash through event logs. You can detect lateral movements through event logs. You can detect a whole bunch of stuff through event logs just by grabbing those. Like, was it event log 4205 successful login? Look for successful and failures. If you see an admin moving from one system to another system to another system, what's that called? Lateral movement, right? There you go. So you got lateral movement licked based off of specific use cases. Same thing for past the hash. NTLM SSP logging in through remote host with a randomized host name. Probably not a good idea in your network, right? That's a good idea. Past the hash is probably being spread across your network and your infrastructure. So just by grabbing event logs and building use cases off your existing technology having your SIMs and reduce the ability of that is a good idea. And I'll talk a couple about those. But so anyways, how do endpoint compromises work? Because it seems like it's magic, right? Endpoint compromises to me are one of the simplest things possible because the exploitation technique doesn't matter. And when I say it doesn't matter, I mean it does matter. But a lot of times hackers could use Adobe Flash exploits. You might hear that, or Adobe PDF exploits, or whatever it ends up being. Commonly though, I don't think I've ever used an exploit in the past 2 years against a system. I've just used horrible things like Java applets. Java applets are the worst thing that this industry has ever seen. Java itself is the worst thing this industry has ever seen. It's the worst thing that anybody's ever seen in IT and everything, okay? I'm sorry for any Java programmers, but that shit's horrible, okay? That is not magic. That is just shit. So, hate Java. Yeah. Where's the shit slide? I don't have a shit slide. This is what I think about Java. Anyways. But for me, exploitation around those types of systems aren't necessarily things that I use flaws that are how things are supposed to be designed. And I'll show you a couple of these in a second. So for me as an attacker, the first thing I do is do my homework. I threat model, which you probably heard Ian talk today, right? Talk all about threat modeling, so you now are threat model experts because Ian is an awesome threat modeler. Is that even a term, threat modeler? Anyways, and then you go and you attack, right? And then you do persistence and exfiltration. Now here's a good view of this, and I don't know if you can everybody see that a little bit? It's kind of, I should probably bold the letters a little bit. But the first thing I do in a life cycle of an attack, and this is very typical of a good methodology around compromising an organization, everything from start to finish. And this is kind of the same pattern that all of us use, but substitute in your favorite technique of compromising an endpoint with the other attacker's technique, whether that's flash or reader or HTA files or SCT files or whatever it ends up being. It could be whatever you want it to be, okay? So the first thing I do is I'm going to go after a specific organization, defining my target. Let's just say I'm going to target TrustedSec, okay? Now, I'm not giving you the ways of hacking TrustedSec, I hope, but so first thing you do is you define a target. Then you do your reconnaissance or intelligence gathering. You understand the organization that you're going after. What's great about like public tools like LinkedIn and things like that is people post all their shit online all the time. So it's like, hey, we use Blue Coat and we use Semantic Antivirus and we just implemented FireEye 3 months ago, so I know your FireEye implementation sucks because it's only 3 months old. And then we have this SIM technology and it happens to be ArcSight and we implemented ArcSight a year ago. Well, ArcSight takes like 17 years to mature, so then you have to, you have to do so. Sorry, I was throwing jabs out everywhere, aren't I? But you have all of these technologies, and I know how mature your programs are based off of your LinkedIn profile. So then I go like, okay, well, they're using Semantic. I don't got to do anything different at all, right? Hey, using FireEye, I don't have to do anything different at all, right? So, you have all these different things that they have as far as technology that you want to get around to make sure that you know. So doing reconnaissance about who you're going to target. Now, what's great, though, is who's your eventual target of who you want to compromise. Do I want to go after sales? Do I want to go after marketing? That takes a lot of time because if I compromise one organization that doesn't typically have rights, it takes me a while and I might get a higher detection rate. But if I go after folks in IT, they're more savvy against these types of attacks. So, usually I end up erring on the side of caution and going after like sales and marketing people or people in R&D are great folks. But salespeople do anything you want them to. What's great is if you set up a business that is exactly the same as theirs that they're trying to sell to, like you make a fake website like that is in their industry vertical. You're like, hey, I got $5 million. I need to spend with you by next week. Can you hook me up? Yeah, dude, what do you need? I mean, I can get you anything you want to. Like, well, I need you to click this link. It's going to hack your computer. Like, cool. Can I still get money? It's cool. It's fine. So, and it's crazy. Like, I mean, you can literally on these phone calls, especially if you do phone calls are the best. Like, people don't expect you to calm them on the phone. So you can do whatever you want to on phones. Like, yeah. It's funny. We all have like running pools in the office. And one of our, sales guys, Ryan, one of my best friends, we put him on a social engineer call. It was his very first social engineer call last week. We're all monitoring him, like, hey, this is what you should do. And he wanted to get kind of involved because salespeople are awesome social engineers, right? And so he's on the phone and he's getting all the way through he called the help desk up and he's getting him to reset the password and tell him the password, which is the most atypical thing that you could possibly do. And he's just in the middle of giving him the password. And we happen to use spoofcard.com at the time, so spoof your phone number or whatever to come from inside the company. And he's getting the password and he's halfway through giving him the password. And the friggin' phone thing cuts off. SpoofCard is completely down. Loses everything. So, it was anyways, but salespeople could be great social engineers. Then you go and you build or buy a tool. You can go and buy an exploit kit online. There's some great ones out there. If you're not a savvy hacker out there, you can just go and buy an exploit tool and they can, do everything for you, which is fantastic. Or you build your tools, using things like the social engineer toolkit. Horrible tool. I don't know whoever wrote that. Builder, and then from there you build your attack profile. This is typically how I'm going to get in. Is this going to be, for me it's about the flow, about who I'm targeting. So I'll usually go after a couple people, and I'll build something off of that individual person or a couple of people in order to go and do my attack. And once you're there, you test for detection and probe for via phishing. A lot of times I might even send one email out just so they click on a link, but it doesn't do anything malicious. It just probes their computer to say, okay, I have this version of Windows, or hey, maybe they're a Mac shop, or whatever else that I couldn't find maybe off of LinkedIn. And then from there, just get versions, things like that, and understand it. The problem with exploitation and running direct exploits across environments is that you never know exactly what version they're going to be running consistently across the board. No one here has the same version of Java deployed across their entire enterprise. It's not going to happen. No one has the same version of Internet Explorer, everything else, right? So it becomes very, very difficult to do. Once you do that, you compromise the system itself. You deploy your system, and you attack, and you get your initial intrusion. Now, the intrusion piece here, the initial intrusion, is one of the hardest pieces to detect. Because in a lot of cases, if it's not dropping specific things like binaries or other things like that, and it's something that's very atypical in your environment, you may not see it happen. And this initial intrusion part is the biggest weakness that we have right now in security, because we're relying off of every single person in our organization for a level of mechanism of security in our organization. So if we don't detect this, which is very probable that we won't detect something like this, then we have to detect them in other methods across the network. And so the initial intrusion to me is still a problem. I still want to detect that if I can. But if I can't, what are the other things that they may do or an attacker may do in my organization that I really need to be concerned with? Things like ransomware. Ransomware will enumerate a lot of the crypto libraries that are built into Windows right ahead of time and start, firing away at systems. You can build detection capabilities around to say, okay, if something is enumerating the crypto libraries and starts, reading in a ton of files and renaming files immediately, you want to shut that process down almost instantaneously so it doesn't actually happen in your environment. But more traditional attackers, once I get my initial intrusion, I establish a command and control infrastructure, and I start moving to systems that I need access to, right? And there's a lot of techniques that we use to do that. Things like clear text passwords in memory, using like the WDigest method with Mimikatz, or other things like hashes on the systems, or LLM-NAR, local link multicast resolution protocol, or MBNS. All those are common methods for us to try to move to different systems to get access to. What's also interesting is that most of the main exploitation methods are still binary droppers. Like still to this day, and a very high level of it. Like even if you trigger an exploit, like let's just say I get hit with Adobe Flash exploit, it's going to download a binary onto the system and infect the system with a command and control infrastructure. And almost 93 to 94% of the time. Now things are moving to PowerShell, and they still are definitely in PowerShell. I guess we have Bash next to be thankful for. Like they're incorporating Bash into Windows, which I thought was amazing. Like I was doing a happy dance, almost as excited when we won the championship for Cleveland. But if you look at the binary stuff, we're still struggling with binaries. So what I would offer to say with this is that you have the ability right now within your organizations with like AppLocker. You can say if this binary is not signed with these specific publishers, then don't allow this executable to ever run in your environment. That alone can stop a large percentage of like 90% of your bullshit that you're dealing with on a daily basis just by doing that. Now we're going to say, oh, well, we can't do that because our environment is so jacked up and people are installing stuff everywhere. We can't do a baseline. I understand that, but you have to figure out a balance between that, right? Maybe only allow executables to run in a certain directory or something like that. You can figure out ways around it. But at least baseline, and all executables should be code signed. If they're not code signed, you shouldn't even allow them in your network in the first place. Be like, hey, I don't care what company you are, but you're not code signing your stuff. That's not legit. So you can stop a large percent of those. Most hackers don't code sign stuff. Granted, I think there was one recently. I think Angler or Tesla, one of them, actually did a code signing one recently, but that was quickly stopped and removed out. But that still stops a large percentage. So let me show you a demo using HTA with SET version 7.2. Now, what's cool about this version is one of the main methods that I used to use was Java applet attacks. And I can still use Java applet attacks. I kind of use that as a fallback method. But people have been getting kind of conscious around Java applets and blocking them, which has been good. So I moved to this technique called HTAs. And I've been using this now for about 2 years, about 2 years. And HTAs are great because there was this book that that Justin Elzy, one of our pen testers, brought me onto, and I was like, he was telling me about HTAs and how cool they were, and he finds this book, and it's from like 1997, and it's like this thick. It's like a 400-page book on hacking or something like that, and it's like this big and like that wide, and it's like rainbow colors and stuff. I don't remember the name of it, but like on page like 7,922, it said like, there's this cool method you can use with like HTAs, and you can infect machines with that, and that was like in 1997. They're cool again because they're basically like Java but for Windows, and you don't need to have Java installed, and it's the same type of prompt. But it's just built into Windows, and you get full code execution. You can compromise everything, which is awesome for us. So let me show you a demo. Type in my password, right? It's not the same one as LinkedIn, I'm just saying. Asses. So I'm going to launch the new SE Toolkit. And now this has a couple new features. Notice the code name is wine and gold. I had to, yeah. And I also put, let me see if I can find it. A tool's not a tool unless it has ASCII art. It's the Punisher. All right, we got that one. Hang on. All right. Where's it at? It's random, so I gotta. There it is. There we go. Yeah.
What's a calves?
What's a calves?
What about cows?
You are dead to me, sir. One thing that I also added to get back in is, and with 7.2, is everybody seen the show Mr. Robot, right? So Mr. Robot episode 5, they're hacking into, I think it's called Steel Mountain instead of Iron Mountain. And they're hacking into Steel Mountain. They use the social engineer toolkit to social engineer their way into Steel Mountain, okay? But they used this super old version of SET that had SMS spoofing in it. So you could SMS spoof, and then you send a message, and it happened to be the lady that your husband's in the hospital or something like that, and she was all distraught and left, and then Elliot could go hack into him or everything. So that's Mr. Robot. I've honestly gotten like 40 emails, like 400 calls, like, 10 bug requests, and like, why isn't SMS spoofing in there? And I'm like, no one ever uses this in the first place, but anyways, I added that back into this version, so it works. I don't know, whatever, go ahead and use it. It's going to spoof SMS, and then you can send it out, but now everybody's not going to be mad at me for Mr. Robot in there, but jeez. So you go to the website attack vector, and then we're going to do number 8, which is the HTA attack method. Now, all of these still work very good. Tab nabbing is kind of, I don't really do that too much. Webjacking works really great because it takes advantage of the hover over and defeats the hover to see if the link is legit or not. But we'll do the number 8, and then I'll do site cloner, and I'll just clone TrustedSec as an example. And I need my IP address. Now, this has been drastically improved in 7.2. For one, everything is completely obfuscated with dynamic variable names, encryption on top of it, so the payload is actually encrypted in memory. Did a lot of great stuff around the pieces around actually detecting this. It does PowerShell injection, so it never touches disk. So it's doing PowerShell native PowerShell injection and then sends it up. What's funny is I got a GET request put up for Unicorn, which is one of my tools that does the PowerShell injection technique. And like, hey, it's getting flagged by, I think it was Symantec or McAfee, I don't remember which one. But like, hey, it's getting flagged. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I started looking at it, and I realized that I forgot to randomize 2 of the variable names. And of course, they're flagging off the 2 variable names. So I just randomized the 2 variable names, and it got around all of those. So whatever. Fucking ridiculous. Ridiculous. So we'll go to use the HTTPS interpreter payload. This is going to go through, and it's going to use the x86 downgrade attack, which can work on 64, 32-bit platforms, set everything up for you.
Take a drink.
It's good. Scotch. Caribbean cask. So we're going to go over here, my box, and just click the add on accident, I think. And then we just go to my IP address. But what I would do is I'd create a great looking website that would be believable in every way. I'd send an email out to them saying, hey, you need to go to this website to do something, right? There's so many different awesome pretexts that you can use to get access to machines. I mean, Martin has ones that they leverage that they like. Justin has ones that they like. Paul leverages different ones. You can do everything from health benefits to, whatever you want to, especially if you're doing research on the company. When you're doing social engineering, it's all about making something believable. It can be completely ridiculous. As long as it's believable, it doesn't make a difference, and they'll click the link. And you can even build things in like, hey, this is an employee verification system, so as soon as you get to there, make sure you hit open, okay? Make sure you hit the open button, and it works, and you'll be all set. So you hit that. We'll go to our site, hit open. Now you get this, right? The publisher is Microsoft Windows, right? Does that look good to you guys? Isn't this Java again? I don't have to sign shit. I don't need a code signing cert. I don't need anything. It just says, hey, name is the Microsoft HTML application host. Publisher is Microsoft Windows. Is anybody here not going to click that? You guys are bull. If you guys got that, you will be clicking it too. I'm sending you one next week. We're going to see about that. You hit allow. And as soon as you hit allow, it redirects to the legitimate website itself. So you're at TrustedSec.com, so you don't notice that you're at a malicious site in any way, shape, or form. And then over here we get our shell. Now what's great about this is I'm not aware of anything that actually detects these type of files. Now, from a defensive perspective, I'll talk about how you stop this, okay? Because I think it's important to understand both sides. But I'm not aware of anything right now that detects this, which is fantastic. At least for me, it's fantastic. I just need to inject that into every other slide. Like, just, it doesn't need to even be part of it. Just, anyway. Or that, or this one. Anyway. So detecting these attacks. So, it's funny, like, I had my whole slides done. I'm like, I forgot to do, like actual Giphy images that I could have up there. But anyways, so detecting these attacks are interesting, okay? So there's a couple components. Remember I talked about maybe I don't detect the initial intrusion, but I detect the patterns that I do afterwards. And so the initial intrusion is important because I'm going to be writing an HTA file to disk. That is the only remnant that I will have on the operating system is an actual HTA file. Do you ever need to have HTA files ever exposed in your outside internet? No. Block them on your content filtering software, block them on your web applications, everything going outbound connections. Block all that. You never need a HTA file on your outside. I don't think there's anything that I know of that leverages HTAs. I mean, something horrible, probably like WebEx or something, but, anyway, sorry. Hopefully no one's here from there. But so you might need something like that. But I've never seen an HTA file that you never need. So disable those. Same thing for there's a great list. And if anybody's interested, just email me. It's davek@trustedsec.com. Don't send me any HTA files, but I can send you a list. I have a great list of things that are being leveraged right now for exploitation that are very atypical type file formats, like SCT files. Those are being leveraged very hard. C-script files are being leveraged very hard. Java files are being leveraged really hard. You can block those at your firewall without very much impact at all to a lot of your performance of what you typically do. So blocking those is very easy. But what's also interesting, so I'm going to write an HTA file to disk, which you should detect. If anybody's using Windows 10 or has at least PowerShell version 3 or above in their environments, you can detect PowerShell commands through event logs. Which is fantastic. So you can see, hey, if I'm putting encoded commands, or IEX, invoke expression, or a lot of the other ones, you can build great detection rules off of PowerShell injection, which would definitely flag on these as well. I'm a huge advocate of what are called honey tokens, okay? Now, again, remember I talked about the initial intrusion itself, you may not detect, but you can definitely map out the rest of it, right? What's great about me as an attacker is I go for the path of least resistance and the things that I know that you probably won't flag on. Tokens in memory, or either Kerberos tokens or passwords in memory are two things that I'm very, very eager to go after. Now, there's a command that you can leverage, and is everybody familiar with local link multicast resolution protocol and MBNS NetBIOS name services? There's a tool called Responder out there. Everybody familiar with that, right? So what Responder does is it sits in the network and it listens, okay? And it listens for, what happens is your Windows machine will say, hey, I need to access a file share. I need to find out what the resolution is for this host name to IP address. And it checks its local cache. If it's not there, it checks its local host files. If not, it sprays across the network and says, hey, is Bob's computer anywhere? Does anybody know where Bob's computer is? And the responder's like, yep, I'm Bob's computer. Come on and connect to me. And then it passes the hash values to you. Very common technique, okay? The second technique that's also very common, and this is used consistent across the board, whether you're a pen tester or a hacker or whatever, is using something like Mimikatz, being able to extract clear text passwords out of memory. So there's a couple of ways that you can really mess with hackers. The first one is, and I'll show you a better way of doing this. This is kind of a hack job of doing it. But you can run as with the net only command. What that does is it says, don't communicate out with the domain controller, don't authenticate, just spawn a process with this username and password. And it will actually send a clear text username and password that is not authenticated with that username and password across your environment. And what you can do with this is you can send a scheduled task across all of your endpoints and servers and say, create just notepad.exe across your network with these username and passwords. Create a domain admin account with this, just say it's GOAT, right? Say my domain is TrustedSec and the username is goat-da, not enticing at all. Create a domain admin called goat-da. Create a super complex password. And then if you ever get a failed login attempt in any of your environments for that account right there, you know shit's broke. Like you are in trouble, right? Someone's in your stuff with Mimikatz and all up in it, right? So that's a great one right there. There's also what you can leverage is randomizing host names and then doing those out while you're doing this run as command, because it'll actually spray it out with that username. Now the problem with this technique though is that it'll only use the local host name that you're using and the credentials that were used for that specific one. So I don't recommend this one. I'll show you a better way of doing this. And so what's great about working in a development shop, we have a tool called Vision, and all the guys, we're all sitting around together trying to figure out ways of being able to do these in our tools. We came across this Windows API call called Create Process with Login W. And this specific API is one of my most favorite APIs because it serves two purposes for me. The first one is I can create honey tokens across my environment with this specific call. So this specific call right here has the ability to create a fake username, fake password, and on a domain. So you can leverage this in PowerShell as an example and run a PowerShell script across your network with these fake credentials and not have it prompt or not even show anything. The second thing you can do is my favorite part is this, the LP command line variable. The LP command line variable allows you to specify a command line option that you can run, which can be a net use command, which will then spray your username and password across a fake username and password across the network. So I'll do things like Nessus, across the network, or SQL Service-SA accounts, or, domain admin 1 or whatever across the network. And the only people that are ever going to see these accounts are hackers. So again, multiple layers and doing things that would entice me as an attacker. I'm not going to know the difference that if there's a password in memory that matches an actual domain user, a domain admin user in your environment, I'm going to go after that in 2 seconds. No questions about it. There's a couple of good resources for this. By the way, there's also another really good way of detecting LLMNR and MBNS across your network. If you spray that LLMNR attack across the network, the net use command that sends it across the network, if you ever see a 4648 explicit credentials were used to log into the remote machine, that's bullshit, because that username and password's fake. That should never be allowed in your environment. Someone's running a responder in your environment. So you can grab that event log and say, okay, well, 4648 is in your environment. That's not good, right? No one should ever be accepting those credentials because that's BS. You also want to look at 4625, which is failed login as well. There's 2 good tools out there that you can leverage. Ben 10, who's part of TrustedSec, he wrote what's called PowerShell Defense. And it has these already built in. It'll do LLMNR and MBNS through PowerShell. It'll also do the honey tokens. And there's also another great one from Fuzzy Security called Invoke Run As, which is basically the Run As command, but in PowerShell. So you can schedule tasks across your environment. There's no impact to performance or systems to your environment. You should never see those, but it's great ways you can build in those detections into your environment. Lateral movement's very, very much similar. Looking for lateral movement in your environment. Hey, if I see specifically local accounts are great ones to do, but if I see, was it 4605, logging in, the successful login from one system to another, you want to look at those consistently across the board. And you can do timing things, like if I see same source logging into multiple systems across the network, that's probably a bad thing, right? Someone's probably combing through your network looking for certain things, and you want to investigate those. So a lot of great things you can see from that. Now I'm going to show you a couple examples of attacks here, and this isn't a product plug in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to tell you exactly the different detection paths that you can do, and I feel really weird even showing the thing. This is the only demo that I had. But here's how you do pass the hash across the network in Metasploit. There's a lot of ways of doing pass the hash. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run pass the hash across the network. Now what's interesting about this in indicators of Metasploit, and this isn't a good indicator, but at least you can see Metasploit across your network, is Metasploit randomizes the host names. So if you don't have a consistent hostname theme across your network and you have a randomized hostname authenticating with the NTLM SSP account, that's probably not good in your environment. You probably want to investigate that specific one from happening. So you can actually see those occurring. Plus you can actually see whether or not it was joined to the domain or not. So you can see a lot of those actually occurring. So if I go over to my other machine that I have my detection capabilities on, and this is Vision, but you can see past the hash here. And I'm going to go down the raw log really fast. And you should be able to pull from those specific event logs what was actually run and the services that were run there as well. So again, getting event logs into your environment is something very important. Here's LLMNR. So you can see these are fake LLMNR things. You can use the same honey token piece spraying across your network. So we see that spraying across the network. That's a fake one. Now what you want to do for this one, when you spray these across the network, okay, you want to make the password easy. You want to make because an attacker actually has to crack these passwords in order to actually use it, because it's NetNTLM B2, so it's going to be assaulted with your domain name as well as a few other things. And so, let's just say we have a fake account here. You want to make the password somewhat easy, so make it like 6 or 7 characters, okay? Then the attacker goes and cracks it. He's like, oh, sweet, I cracked the password and everything. I'm going to go authenticate. Now, what a responder will do is they'll say, okay, well, the client that I actually got this from is 192.168.170.129. So I'm going to authenticate with this account and this domain name or whatever to this specific IP address. Now, if I look for that failed login attempt within your event logs, and you have like a SIM or something like that centrally there, you'll be able to detect that in your environment and then trigger the oh hell alarm that you've been compromised. Or you're catching your annual pen testers, either way. Yeah, pen testers like, son of a bitch. Pen testers like, I hate you, dude. So you should be able to see alarm details. Same thing for like credentials. Like here's Mimikatz, right? And so we'll go use Mimikatz, and then I'll migrate to a 64-bit process so that I can grab the credentials out of the W Digest. And as soon as I migrate over, I'm going to grab all the creds. Now we grab the creds out of clear text. So these are the ones that are randomly sprayed into memory. So, like DBAC service or Nessus accounts or whatever, those are all accounts that you want to make look enticing. Like, hey, I want to make it a super domain admin account. And I really recommend creating that account in the Active Directory so that it gives a level of believability. As an attacker, I'll probably drop to a shell and look to see if that account actually exists, if it's expired, is it active or not. And if all those are met right, I will probably try to use that username and password. Clear indication that something's wrong. Again, pen tester's like, son of a bitch. And so here's a way of looking at the, so here's using set. I already showed this one. I'm not going to even go through it. But same thing again, detecting HTA files and stuff like that. So a lot of ways. So I showed you a few different things of detecting. Now, what's interesting is there's a lot of terms now coming out of this industry that are very good. I think hunt teaming is fantastic. I think purple teams are fantastic. If you're not familiar with hunt teaming, it's the ability of going out and looking for things in your environment where you already assume that you're compromised or that there may be indicators in your environment that you want to go after. Very noble thing to have in your environment. But what's great about the hunt team side is that it's taking people that were traditionally like looking at logs all day long or looking at SIMs all day long and getting them more on the offensive for the defensive purposes. So going out to systems and looking at things, investigating things, actually getting them from just log analysis to more going on the offensive and understanding red team techniques. And I think that's really important. I think the hunt teaming movement needs to have people that are part of the red team and blue team on that in order to really understand what's happening, more so that purple team side. For me, when you look at a lot of these vulnerabilities that we have, I think if you look at down the road, like 10 years, I think we're going to be in a much better state as an industry, at least a little bit more stable. Because right now, what happened is we didn't realize this whole security thing was really going to happen the way it did. Well, we all did. We were like crying wolf for like 20 years, but the business never said anything like that. And they're like, "Oh, you're not going to be able to fix everything overnight, so it's going to take a lot of time to get better." A good example is the hacking team. You ever watched what happened with the hacking team, right? The group that made the exploit kits and then sent it out to everybody. They got hacked, and then the hacker actually published probably one of the best well-written reports that I've ever seen in my life. Like if you ever watch the report, like he gives like specific references and shout-outs and like links to how he figured out the research that he did, and like it literally like if he wasn't illegally hacking into businesses, I would love to hire the guy because he's got some skill, right? Which is great. Minus the whole illegal part, I wouldn't do that, right? But what's nice about that is it showed exactly how everything from the reconnaissance phase, looking at targeting organization, looking at what vulnerabilities they had found in order to move to lateral movement. He literally followed the penetration testing execution standard just to a T when they actually went through and hacked them. So another thing, next generation products right now are one of my biggest pet peeves in this industry today. You might have heard of like a lot of the new products that are coming out that are replacements for antivirus and things like that. And believe me, I hate antivirus more than anybody here. Believe me, I was doing talks 6 or 7, 8 years ago about how antivirus is dead and everything else. The problem is that a lot of these new technologies that are coming out, that stop 99.9% of the hackers, or like they're literally not something that is going to be a benefit to you long term, because at least the antivirus products have other components to it, like firewalls and stuff, right? Or, like heuristics stuff, which like still sucks, but doesn't suck as bad as just having nothing, right? And so when you run into a lot of these products, I'd caution you when you're actually evaluating these to actually do your own testing to figure them out, because most of them are a bunch of vaporware. So when I start talking a little bit about the defensive pieces, for me, if you look at organizations and kind of how they're structured, we really need to start looking at the whole business and how they're operating in order to change the defensive side that we have. I think in security, we've always been really focused on like, hey, you need to stop this because, this is wrong. Instead, we're getting more open, saying you can do whatever you want to. We'll just figure out a way to secure it. And that's a lot of change in the culture. Bug bounty programs, anybody here a fan of bug bounty programs? It's good. Good. Bug bounty programs are an interesting conversation right now. A lot of people are leveraging them for things like penetration tests. I'd caution you, granted, I'm a biased person. I do penetration tests, and that's the core of a lot of my business for penetration tests. But what's interesting about bug bounty programs is that a lot of people are leveraging them for the same type of consistency as penetration tests. And while they may yield some results, they're definitely not a good encompassing understanding of both offense and defense of what's actually happening out there. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to slip through these real quick. If you look at your 2 highest probabilities out there, your user population, your perimeter, right? Do we all agree with that? Anybody disagree with that? Users, number 1. Does anybody disagree with users being number 1? We're all laughing, right? Because we all know it's like terrible. And your perimeter being number 2. So we know that that's the problem. That's what we need to focus our security program on and our defensive capabilities. Some mitigations that I really recommend, things that stop me as an attacker, randomized or disabled local admins. Me being able to compromise one machine, escalate myself up to administrative level rights usually isn't too hard. Then getting the hashes or the passwords off of one system and then moving to other systems is typically how I operate as an attacker. So you randomize those on each individual machine, either endpoints and servers. It becomes much more difficult to actually go and leverage those. Lower use of privileged accounts. Does a domain admin ever need to log into a member server? Ever? No. You don't need a domain admin to ever log into a member server ever. You need to have member server accounts for those admin guys, and then separate accounts for domain admin. I know it sucks. It's a bit of a process because they have to remember, just another password, right? That's why we have password vaults and stuff, which just got owned recently. But so you don't need a domain admin ever logging out. Now, for me as an attacker, I want access to everything. I want access to the passwords. I want to get the golden ticket so I can maintain access for a long period of time. If I can't find a domain admin token, in most cases I don't have a legitimate way of getting access to the domain controllers themselves. So really trying to minimize the privileged accounts across your network. Remove excessive account usage. I already mentioned that. Vulnerability management. Still to this day, the easiest way that we still get into organizations are from either like passwords that were an issue, or things like JBoss or Apache, which have been fixed for years, but they haven't rolled out a new version in any way, shape, or form. Or still MS-0867. That still blows my mind. When I see one, I'm like, listen, you have failed here. Like, everybody watched the Arrow, or like, you have failed this city. It's like you're supposed to be Arrow, dude, or women or whomever. You're supposed to be the guardians of this environment. You have MS-0867 sitting over here from like 2008. You failed. Like, if you have MS-0867 in your environment, like, that's bad. Like, I don't care what you're doing. Go find a new job somewhere else. Like, if you can't get a patch for MS-0867, you need to go somewhere else because you're not doing any impact there. Stop basic binaries, file types, things like that, PowerShell. What's interesting with AppLocker is that if you have good control over your user accounts, like for example, your users aren't running as administrators, you can use AppLocker and say, AppLocker, block PowerShell.exe and syswall64 and the System32 directory for anybody aside from administrators. Do normal users ever need to be running PowerShell in any way, shape, or form? No. So knock that out and get rid of it. Same thing for file types. Stop SCT files running in temp directories. Don't allow DLL to be injected into temp directories. Like, that's just common stuff, right? Executables probably don't need to run if they're not being code signed. A lot of cool things that you can leverage. Visibility into the logs, things like that. My favorite GPO is deny access computer from the network. This one here jacks me up. Okay? You take this out and you remove everybody but like your IT help desk folks and everybody else that needs access. And I literally have no way of moving laterally in the environment even if I have an administrator account. If I have a administrator hash, I can't authenticate with a local administrator because of this friggin' group policy. It sucks. So then I have to figure out some like other way of getting access and I have to find a server vulnerability. And hopefully I'm being loud enough that you actually go and detect me because I have to go to these other systems. So those are all common things that I like leveraging when I'm actually going through and attacking. So last but not least, for me, we all need to be purple. I find the most exciting things is working with people that are on the defense, that are trying to combat a lot of these things and understanding how they're doing things. Because I find new ideas every single time when I work with the blue team. There was a purple team engagement that I went into a conglomerate, multi-global, whatever company in this world. And I sat down with them for a week, and the objective wasn't to go in and find vulnerabilities from a red team perspective. The objectives were to find vulnerabilities and see what they saw from the detection standpoint and sit with them and work with them in building detection capabilities from the type of attacks that I was doing. And at the end of the day, we had 70 different ways of detecting things like PowerShell injection, lateral movement, hash exfiltration. Like did you know there's a log that gets generated that you can detect like hash exfiltration out of your network? Like, there's so many things that you can do just by sitting there and working with people on a regular basis and taking the time out of your day to build those detection capabilities out. It requires you to actually take time from just monitoring those logs to actually building those defensive capabilities out. Last but not least, my book. I was recommending a book. This is from a guy out of Wharton who did analysis around a lot of these successful people, but like Steve Jobs and a lot of the other folks. But it's how nonconformists move the world, and it's basically about how you can be in a position at your job, and your job is your job. You come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and you leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Or if you're like TrustedSec, you come in at like 11 or 12 and like leave at like 4 or whatever. But same thing at BDS. Jamie, you were gone early Friday. I saw that. But what's interesting with this one is it says, hey, you're in a company. They're used to a specific way of behaving. How do you change that as being one person? And I think that's what's most important, because you are changing a culture, you are changing the way IT does work, you are changing the way that security does work. So how do you change that pattern of behavior and environment? That's a great book around how to do it. Anybody have any questions? Actually, everybody stayed for the whole hour. I'm impressed. That's amazing. Question back there? Yep.
As far as pass to hash, do you recommend a separate forest, one-way trust, via IPsec in a production environment to mitigate against the golden token compromise?
Good question. So the question was, do you recommend for things like pass to hash, having like a one-way transitive trust with servers, different AD domains, in order for authentication to stop things like pass to hash? So those are, and the second part of that was leveraging IPsec for server-server communications to stop those and to hopefully minimize golden ticket type attack. So there's a couple pieces to that. One is your user account still need to authenticate in some way, shape, or form, right? So if I compromise the machine, pass to hash is still going to be pretty effective across the board because I'm already authenticated on that domain. I still have the ability to move to different, at least endpoints, not necessarily servers. Server isolation is probably the best recommendation. Your user population shouldn't have to communicate on things like NetBIOS and SMB and RPC and RDP and all these other communications, right? So to me, I'd minimize all those ports and protocols as much as possible. Obviously, for things like domain controllers, you still need those ports and protocols, not RDP. But file servers, you still need some of those. But defining those roles within an organization, and then creating more of a perimeter around your server pool environment. So that, even server-to-server communications can be shut down quite a bit of not having to communicate to one another. So you create more of those islands from that. IPsec will definitely help from server-to-server communications, but if I already compromise a server, I still have the ability to authenticate to the same type of server on the same network across the board. So that doesn't necessarily stop lateral movement in those environments if I find a vulnerability in those type of areas. So I'd recommend minimizing the ports and protocols. Leveraging what you mentioned are great additions. Golden ticket is a little bit harder because it's forging a Kerberos token that never really expires, that you can leverage forever and ever and ever in the environment. It's still compromised even when you've reset passwords across the board, except for KRB or RT or whatever. But those are things that I'd recommend. It's kind of minimizing the footprint of those. Golden ticket's extremely difficult to protect against.
If it's in a separate forest, doesn't it protect it? Like
if the servers are in a separate forest, then how are they going to authenticate to things like, I granted, I understand you have a one-way trust, but how are you going to handle direct server communications? Is that going to be in another, server admins and stuff like that?
Well, the administrators of the domain are in a separate forest, so you protect.
But what if I compromise the administrator's account?
You have layers of defense within
Sure.
the domain, so that in the separate forest.
Yep.
They can administer the domain.
Yep.
The users within the domain, but it's a one-way trust into that. Like the red forest is, I think, Microsoft refers to it as.
Yep.
So doesn't the one-way trust between the two forests protect the golden ticket that's in the other forest?
Absolutely. So, for one-way trusts, if I have the ability to do certain permission types on there, that's fine. However, what I would say though is you're still going to have user accounts in that separate forest, correct? Or the separate domain, correct? So, are any of your administrators that are in one forest never going to have the same password in the other? Well, that's good because that would be unique to me. So, but that's good. If you can keep them completely separate and isolated, that's fine. But there's a lot of ways for me as an attacker to still leverage that. For example, if I'm going to log into that separate domain. That is the protected forest or whatever you want it to do. I'm going to monitor the administrators of that account and their keystrokes. I'm going to monitor everything they're doing from their machines. I'm going to leverage the jump boxes that they're leveraging to go into there to actively go and do it. Whether it's SSH to get in and monitoring those and hooking into that and doing those, or RDP. I'll typically survey and monitor those until I can find a way and commonly into those. So it's not 100% in any way, shape, or form, but definitely a much better layer than what we typically see out there for sure. Any other questions?
When you compromise golden tickets, have you ever done it in production, or do you specifically test, just different tests?
Well, with golden tickets, I'll usually forge it off the domain itself because you just need you need the password, you need the domain name, the SID, and a couple of other things, right? And a domain GUID, I think. And you can forge the Kerberos token off of that offline and then leverage that again across the board. So you can do that completely off the network and then keep that ticket saved, later on down the road, and you don't have to worry about it somewhere else. So you can typically forge it without having to have any issues, and that's really hard to detect too. Any other questions? Well, hey, round of applause for everybody that made BSides possible. Rocky, everybody else out here. Justin, I know a lot of folks helped out, so thank you BSides for having me out here. And that's it for me. Let's drink.